Okay, let's really get into the psychological shock of the Black Death.
This was the medieval world, a reality just built on absolute divine certainty.
Life just followed this predictable rhythm. Their worldview felt as solid as a rock. But then, a shadow fell. It started as just a terrifying rumor from far away. This wasn't just some sickness. It was something they totally could not comprehend. The brutal truth? Their whole fortress of faith offered no explanation and no defense at all.
And it didn't care about your status. It killed the rich and the poor equally.
It struck down the holiest of priests, sometimes right there at the altar itself. You can just see how the promises of their reality were shattered by the facts. This wasn't just a crisis, it's what's called an ontological collapse. So what's that? Basically, their entire map for how reality works, poof, it was just suddenly erased. This collapse triggered what you'd call mass cognitive dissonance, a huge mental conflict. I mean, what sin could be so awful it would warrant this kind of punishment? Their whole cause and effect universe, where things made sense, it was just gone. This led to this deep existential terror. You can't fight an enemy you can't even see. With no science to fall back on, their minds just grasped for any reason at all. Anything, right? Any explanation was better than facing the absolute chaos of it all.
So the medieval mind was just left alone, terrified, in a sea of complete uncertainty.
You know, the mind hates a mystery, so when there's no explanation, it invents one. Usually, someone to blame. And just like that, this abstract fear turned into a hunt for concrete enemies, right in their own towns. The first and most tragic targets? Europe's Jewish communities. They were already outsiders, making them an easy mark. A really dark, twisted logic took over. Simple facts were warped into proof of a huge conspiracy. Look, this wasn't about evidence. It was a psychological need. It gave them a simple, horrible answer.
This changed everything. The plague wasn't a natural mystery anymore. It was a crime with perpetrators to punish.
And this gave people a desperate sense of agency, a feeling of control, even if it was a total illusion. Feeling powerless was channeled into a brutal show of power. They called it self-defense, not hatred. But scapegoating is like a virus. Once it started, it didn't stop. The fear just needed more targets. So the circle of the other just kept getting wider. Anyone who was different was now a threat. The world just shrank. The bonds of trust completely dissolved, replaced by a deep, fearful tribalism. Your own village felt safe, but the next one over, a huge threat. The drawbridge went up against humanity. See, it's less scary to believe your neighbor is evil than to accept that the universe just doesn't care. So let's see how 14th century society answered this when the Black Death hit. The plague was so overwhelming, it was like the future itself was completely erased. But this dread didn't unite people. Instead, it split them right down the middle. Two opposing camps, both desperate, sprang up from the chaos. A real psychological split. Okay, first up, the group that chose a path of extreme public suffering. They believed the plague was God's punishment for sin, and they had a solution. This wasn't just madness. It was a desperate, extreme attempt to bargain with God. By choosing to suffer, they were taking control of their pain, a powerful move. Now let's swing to the other side of the spectrum, a completely opposite response. And their logic? Well, it actually makes sense in a world with no tomorrow. If God isn't listening and death is coming anyway, why not live for right now? This was really a way to numb themselves against that overwhelming, crushing dread. So two completely opposite reactions, but here's where it gets really interesting, what they share. Because this gets to the core idea. These two paths, not so different after all. The flagellant whipping himself and the reveler drinking were driven by the exact same thing. They were both just trying to escape the paralysis of pure gut-wrenching terror. One through pain, the other through pleasure, but both were acts of defiance. So what this all shows is that extreme crisis reveals a shared, desperate human need. What happens when all the rituals that give death meaning just vanish? To get it, you gotta know about the ars moriendi, literally the art of dying. See, before the plague, dying wasn't this lonely, scary thing. It was a community event. This art of dying had steps, you know? Last rites, family care, a proper burial. The whole thing was like this huge psychological safety net for everyone involved. And then, the Black Death hit, and it just annihilated everything. The sheer number of people dying, I mean, it was just completely overwhelming.
Suddenly, priests were dying. Families were too scared to help. People died completely alone.
So that community comfort? Gone. Replaced by just pure, isolated terror.
But believe it or not, the worst part was how they dealt with the bodies.
Just look at the difference. From a sacred process with family to total horror, alone.
They were literally piled onto carts like firewood. No dignity, no respect, nothing.
This wasn't just logistics. It was a spiritual violation that stripped death of all meaning.
And it got so common that seeing the death cart was like seeing the baker's cart.
There's actually a term for this. It's called psychic numbing, a defense mechanism.
It's not that people became heartless, they were just overloaded, utterly exhausted by trauma.
So the sacred art of dying became this grim, efficient system for corpse disposal. And this break from ritual, it left a huge psychological scar. So what's the takeaway?
Well, it shows just how much we need those rituals when everything falls apart.
The Black Death didn't just kill millions. It completely rewired the way an entire continent thought.
I mean, this was a true cataclysm. It wiped out up to half of Europe's entire population.
But the real impact wasn't just the body count. It was how it shattered their whole worldview.
Survivors were left in a state of collective shock. Everything they thought was certain was just gone.
So the first aftershock? A new kind of macabre obsession with death that totally flooded European art.
They called it the dance macabre, the dance of death. It was their way of processing the trauma.
You'd see skeletons leading everyone to the grave. Popes, kings, peasants. It didn't matter who you were.
The message was terrifyingly clear. Death was the ultimate leveler, a chaotic and unstoppable new force.
All right, aftershock number 2 was all about the economy, and it turned the old social order on its head.
Think about it. With so many people gone, the peasants who survived were suddenly in really high demand.
This massive drop in a labor supply gave survivors a new kind of economic power they'd never known.
This new power fueled a lot of resentment, which led directly to future conflicts and major revolts.
And the final aftershock? Well, it was a deep philosophical shift, a fragile, new appreciation for life. The trauma was like a psychological reset. The focus snapped from the afterlife to the here and now.
The survivors stared right into the abyss and were forced to build a completely new reality from scratch.
So it leaves you with this question, right? How do huge crises reshape not just our world, but our minds?